Dibakaram Dayakaram Dantam Dharma Pravartakam Pranamami Dayanandam Madacharya Param. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. So we'll go to the third verse after chanting the prayer verses. Natva Shri Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranyamunishvaro Adhimahe Pañcadaśī Kaivalyapada-siddhaye Namah Shri Shankarananda Gurupada Bhujanmane Savila Samaha Moha Graha Graseka Karmane. So the third verse I will chant, you can repeat. Shabdasparshadayo Vedyaha
Shabdasparshadayo Vedya Shabdasparshadayo Vedya
Vaichitryad Jagare Pratak
Vaichitryad Jagare Pratak.
So for chanting purpose, even if it is Pratak, it is actually Pratak, but for chanting, sometimes you add an extra vowel at the end for the meter. So it is allowed in chanting. Vaichitryad Jagare Pratak
Vaichitryad Jagare Pratak Vaichitryad Jagare Pratak
Tato Vibhakta Tat Samvit
Tattva-viveka tat-samvit Tattva-viveka tat-samvit
Aikyaropyadna Vidhyate
Vyāna vidyate Aikarupyāna vidyate.
So here, now with a bang, Vidyaranya starts the portion of knowledge. So he introduces this Tattva-viveka chapter with knowledge from the Upanishads. So this first few verses may be a little difficult to assimilate, but this is very beautiful to contemplate on. So he says, what does he want us to understand from these verses? He wants to point out the oneness. So again, Aikyam. Aikyam is oneness. Samvit is consciousness. So first he takes up here the jiva, the individual, and analyzes the individual. And we know that the jiva, the individual, is Sat Chit Ananda. The jiva in the vision of Upanishads is equated to Sat, existence, Chit, consciousness, Ananda, limitlessness. So with logic, next few verses, he will analyze how this jiva is nothing else but samvit, nothing else but consciousness. So how am I Satchit Ananda? So Sat is changeless existence. So this Brahman, with reference to the Jagat, we call it Sat, changeless. It is always there, Sadeva Saumya Idam Agre Asit. Agre Asit means in the beginning there was only existence. Before anything came into existence, there was only existence. And in another definition of Sat or Satyam, we find in Trikalepi tat tishtati, yet tishtati iti satyam. Trikalepi. In all three periods of time, it is always there. In the past, Sat was there. In the present, Sat is now here. In the future, Sat will continue to exist. So it is pure existence. And it is in three periods of time. And Vidyaranya wants to point out that this Satyam, which is Nitya, it is eternal, timeless existence, is the very essence of the individual. The Jiva, as Sat, exists in all three periods of time. So, in fact, there is no birth, there is no death for the individual from the vision of pure, limitless existence. So, this unchanging, invariable truth is called Sat or Satyam. So, he takes now three states of experience that we all undergo on a day-to-day basis. We go through these three states. He takes these three states first for analysis. Viveka has done between what is Sat, what is real, and what is, as we saw, Mithya. Satyam Mithya is the crux of Vedanta. One is a dependent reality, one is absolutely real. And Vidyaranya beautifully takes us through three states of experience to help us understand what we are really going through here. So, first he begins with the waking state. I think in this verse he says, yeah, Shabdasya Shabdasparshadayoho. He says here, Shabdasparshadayo. So let us first just understand how knowledge of the external world takes place. I perceive everything in the external world through my five sense organs. Eyes perceive objects of form and color. Eyes cannot bring in anything else. So each sense perception has its own sphere of operation. How intelligently this body is built, right? Ears have access only to sound objects. Tongue has access to taste objects. Skin has access to touch. And nose has access to objects that it can smell. My whole experience as a human being is with these sense powers. So he takes first, he says Shabda, but we will take perception. Eyes are very important because eyes I believe in totally. Whenever I open my eyes, I believe in what I see. So what does perception give rise to? Let's examine our day-to-day experiences. When I perceive, suppose I perceive that chili there. I perceive the chili there. What happens? Knowledge, Shastra says the vritti as a thought form, it goes out through the eyes, it covers the object, the chili, and it brings the knowledge of the object to the mind. And where does the chili exist? It is an outside object, but where do I experience the chili? I experience the chili in my mind. So this is very important to understand because chili is an external object, but knowledge of the chili only takes place when my mind registers the chili behind, my mind is behind the eyes and registers the chili. Not until the chili comes into my mind does it become an object of knowledge. It is only when the chili enters my mind, it becomes an object of my knowledge. So first thing we understand is that any external object only gains existence when I become aware of it. Really understand this clearly. Or any external object gains existence only when I become aware of it. So this is number one thing that we notice with our experiences. Because anything that comes in through the senses, I have to become aware and say, chili exists. I am the one lending existence to the chili, actually. So the chili thought in my mind, there is two factors to this chili thought. What are the factors? One is the chili name and form. Name and form is right in front of me, chili name and form. But when the vritti, thought modification, comes back to the mind, something lights up that name and form in my mind. So there are two factors to any thought of the external world. One is the name and form of the object, and the other is consciousness lighting up the thought, revealing the name and form. So actually, the chili name and form, what we experience in the mind is chili name and form plus consciousness. We don't recognize that consciousness is always lighting up the thought form of what is outside. So the thought has a name. It is chili thought plus reflected consciousness. It is manifest consciousness. Like a torchlight, consciousness illumines the thought in my mind, and knowledge of the external world takes place. We are so busy, we don't have time to see this happening. We don't have time because I look at an object and knowledge, it's as if it's simultaneous. But Shastra goes through quite in depth the steps of how this knowledge takes place. So I'm able to recognize the object inside my mind. And what do I find with my experiences? Because I have knowledge of the external world, I experience the external world. I have experience of it. But what I'm experiencing is here. This is very interesting. What I'm really experiencing is always here in the mind. So the objects I perceive are many and varied. So this is where the plurality, multiplicity of the Jagat comes into play. There are many, many different various objects in this world that I experience. There are many. So by number, we see many. And in those numbers, every object is varied. So there's variations as well. Some have some certain attributes, others have different qualities, different attributes. So we see number and variety in the Jagat, plurality and variety in the Jagat. But the objects of the Jagat are proved only through my thought form. I am the one who says chili is. I say tree is. I say this roof is. I lend existence through the thought, I lend existence to the objects of the world. Because I experience the objects as varied and many, my whole life experience is in multiplicity. I cannot see the one thing. That's what he points out to here in this verse. That's why I said it's not an easy verse. He starts out with a bang. He starts out with consciousness, recognition of consciousness as the one unchanging factor behind all the vrittis, the thought modifications that keep changing according to the objects of the world. So the first word he uses here is Vedyaha. Vedyaha means objects of knowledge in the waking state. And what are these? Shabda Sparshadi, he says. So Shabda Sparsh, Shabda means sound, Sparsha means touch, Rasa means taste, Gandha means smell, and Drishyam, Drishyam means sight. So all of the sense objects, Shabda Sparshadi, he brings in here, and each one is different. And how do I know everything is different? Through experience, my experiencing each objects, I know that everything is different from everything else. So he says here, Vaichitriya Pritak. Everything is Vaichitriya, it is varied and distinct. Every object is varied and distinct from every other object. Everything has its own peculiarity, and all objects are not the same. This is our experience. Then what about consciousness? Tat Samvit, he says, Tat Samvit, which is consciousness. What about consciousness? So look at this. Tattva-viveka. Consciousness is to be understood. This is Tattva-viveka in the first chapter, is to be understood firstly as separate from all the objects. So we have to understand this first. Why the separation happens? Because we have to see distinctly two things. Then we take in the whole Jagat as manifest consciousness. But first we have to discern the consciousness is giving existence to everything. So he says that tataha vibhakta, consciousness is to be understood distinctly from the objects of the world. What does he mean by like that? We'll see. He says, eka rupyat nabidyate. Consciousness does not vary. Everything else varies. All the thought forms vary. All the objects of the external world vary. You bring in objects, when you look at something, something new comes. When you hear something, another object comes. But what is that invariable thing that lights up the knowledge of all the objects? That he says, eka rupyat na bidyate. It is one form, one consciousness which never changes. It is one entity, homogeneous entity, changeless entity that lights up all the changing thoughts, lights up all the objects in your mind. So it is actually the objects that are changing. The consciousness that lights up does not change because it's like a light. It is just illumining the thoughts that come in the mind, it illumines. One thought is replaced by another thought, another thought, another thought, like this. Whole experience of my waking state is like this. So, na bidyate, he says here, it doesn't change. And this logic can be extended to every state of awareness. He is going to, every state of experience, he is going to examine this. And when you understand this consciousness never varies, it is only the thought modifications that vary. That is called Tattva-viveka, discernment of the truth. You see that you are the one non-changing principle that lights up the ever-changing objects of the world. Because everything we experience, as I said, the experience is in the mind. It comes into the mind. If the objects don't enter my mind through the senses, experience cannot take place. Experience purely takes place because the objects of the world are blessed by consciousness, samvit. So objects come and go, but you are always. Objects come into the mind, they leave. Other objects come, they go. But you, consciousness, are never changing. You are always, you are ever shining. That is why you can recognize the presence of objects in your mind. I can say chili is because I recognize the chili. I can say this plant is. I can say this human being is because I recognize in my mind the existence of the object which is lit up by consciousness. I also appreciate, if we look, I also appreciate the absence of things. I know the absence. If that chili is no longer there, if you pluck that chili, what can I recognize? I recognize what? The chili is not there. Because the thought goes out and the thought recognizes absence of objects also. So absence is lit up by consciousness. The thought of absence of chili is lit up by consciousness. The thought of presence of chili is lit up by consciousness. This is a very chili class, isn't it? I'm using the chili because my eye is on that chili and it's an object. So this absence and presence of everything is taking place in my mind. And what is illumining? He says here, it is samvit. He uses the word samvit. And because once you start seeing this more and more, and you do the viveka between the object thought, and as I said, the thought has two factors: the name and form and function, and consciousness lighting up the thought. The thought cannot be registered unless you illumine the thought. You, in the form of consciousness, has to illumine the thought in the mind for experience to take place in life. This is very profound inquiry. It requires you to just be with yourself and think about it. How does knowledge take place? But this is how the Vedanta Shastra has examined. So in this text, what we're going to see is three factors which are inquired into. Tvam. Tvam is you, the individual. It is called Tvam Pada, and that is inquiry into you, the individual. Then you have a second factor, Tat Pada. Tat is inquiry into that, which is Ishvara. And you have the Asi. Asi means Tat Tvam Asi. You have heard the Mahavakya, great saying. Asi is the grand equation, great equation that equates Tvam with that, you with that. So we're going to see all of these three factors. But in this particular section, Vidyaranya is trying to establish the Nityatvam, the eternal, the timelessness of the individual. Nityatvam means timeless individual, and it is revealed by Vidyaranya by pointing out the changing nature of the objects, but the stability, the oneness of the self, the non-changing self that lights up the changing nature of all objects. Even in our thought, as we were talking about the thought, consciousness powers the thought. Without consciousness, thoughts cannot come to light. So consciousness is the power behind our thoughts. But the problem is what? I take myself to be the changing thoughts, and I cannot recognize that I am the light that lights up the thoughts. This is the biggest mistake human beings make, individual makes. I think I'm the changing states of the mind without recognizing I am the one that lights up the changes. This is the biggest viveka, the inquiry, the discriminative analysis. Once this is seen, then whatever state the mind is in, it may be restless, it may be disturbed, it may be going here, there, but you are unchanged by the changes of the mind. So that is called Sakshi Bhava, witness consciousness. You are simply observing the mind, observing the body, observing quietly, sitting. Beautiful verse in Gita, Krishna says, Navadvare Pure Dehi, the nine-gated city of the body. So that this body has 9 gates, entrance gates, exit gates. A lot of the gates are on the face, 2 eyes, ears, these are the gates, these apertures. These are all entry gates. Exit gates are lower down. So we have exit gates, entry gates. But in the 9-gated city of this body, he says there is a Dehi, indweller. That indweller is sitting quietly there, watching everything take place. The eternal witness, who is Ishvara, who is enlivening everything, lighting up the body, mind, senses, without whom, without which nothing can come to life. That indweller is in every being, every body, and it is simply witnessing. So this is what he brings up here. It is that the names and objects of the world are registered in the thoughts of the mind, which are constantly changing according to the variety of things I see and according to the number of things I see. But I am the one which is lighting up all the changes. I'm lighting up the variety of objects. I'm lighting up the plurality of this seeming plural world. So when you understand this changing combination, when you understand this changing world and the changeless consciousness as distinct and separate, then you have achieved this vivekaha that he talks about here. And it's done through focusing. So that's why it's important to have some space, some place like this where you can be with yourself. You require to examine your thoughts. So it can't be done in a very noisy, that type of place. The retreats are specifically for this inquiry, when we can spend some time just looking at our thoughts and seeing how things are taking place. Otherwise, we don't have the space when we get involved in regular life, we don't have the space. So he says here, Vedyaha, Jagare Vedyaha, which means in the waking state, this is our experience of the world. It is happening on a day-to-day basis, but consciousness also exists here. Now he goes on to the dream state. And in fact, he says the dream state is the ditto, is exactly like the waking state. Logically, he will make you see that it is exactly the same. Sounds quite funny to say dream and waking are the same. But in many texts in Vedanta, the acharyas have pointed out that waking state is also a dream. This waking state is a long drawn out dream. The dream state is a shorter version. So he says in the next verse, Tata swapnetra vedyantu.
Tata swapnetra vedyantu.
Twice. Tata swapnetra vedyantu. Nastiram jagare stiram.
Nastiram jagare stiram.
Nastiram
jagare stiram.
Tat vedo tastayo sambit.
Tad vedo tastayo sambit.
Tad vedo tastayo sambit. Ekarupana bhidyate.
Ekaru vidyate. Ekarupana vidyate.
So he says here, Tatha swapne travedyantu. In the dream state also, you see objects of knowledge. You see many objects, many forms, many utilities, many functions. Again, taking in these two words, there is plurality in the dream of objects, and there is also variation. So the dream world, just as in the waking state, you have variation and plurality. Here in the waking state also plurality, variation. In the dream also plurality, variation. He says that due to the Veda, even in the dream, due to the different, if you remember your dreams, you'll see different thoughts arise in the dream, different objects are perceived. Even in the dream, as you're dreaming, the thoughts are changing. The objects in the dream are changing. But who is lighting up the dream? Who is lighting up the dream state? That is where, here again he says, Eka rupa na vidyate. He says ekarupyat na vidyate, because it is in one homogeneous entity, consciousness, awareness. In fact, you're watching a movie in dream state. You know dream state is false. When is dream state falsified? When you wake up. Soon as you wake up, what happens? Everything that seems real in the dream, you went to the local store and you bought a lottery ticket. And what happened? In the dream, you won $1 million. You had wonderful, ecstatic experience in the dream. And many friends who came to you after you won the money, you had everything you dreamt of. In the dream, you experienced all of that. Suddenly you wake up and you see your bank balance zero. So that dream state is falsified on waking up. What happened to the objects you saw in the dream? What happened to all the situations that you experienced in the dream? Swami Dayananda used to say, because you experience it, it is not real. Because you experience something, it is not real. The thing is, we think because we experience something, it is real. Here, Vedanta is saying, examine this. Because you experience it, it is not real. Just as in dream. So let us see in the dream state, he says, the objects, the only difference in dream between objects of the waking state and dream is that the objects in the dream state are created with the vasanas. So your dormant, your ahankara, as you know it, your egoic sense of individuality is also dormant because you have to enter sleep to go into dream, right? You can't go straight into dream unless you're daydreaming. That's a different dream. But you have to go to sleep, then you enter to dream state. So your ahankara that you have in waking state is dormant in dream. Then what is the ahankara that you experience in the dream? Because there is a sense maybe of I, but you create through your vasanas, you create a different avatar of yourself. So it is really like virtual reality. You have a different avatar of yourself. Different, maybe you could be female in the dream. You could be, different color in the dream, different place in the dream. But your vasanas create different avatar. And the objects of the dream state, what are they? They are mere thoughts. It's much easier to see that dream state is mithya, it is as though real, but waking state is also as though real because objects in the waking state, as I said, are also experienced where the objects are external. I cannot say they're not. I don't create the external world. That is called Ishvara Shrishti. Ishvara Shrishti is an external world created for us to exhaust our karmas. So the external world has been given, but the experience of the external world is here in the mind alone through thoughts. If I don't light up the external world in the waking state, there is no experience at all in my life. Same in the dream, but the dream state, the objects are lit up by vasanas. I mean, they're created by the vasanas I have stored in from the waking state. There have been many storages of experiences, and I've stored all of this in the chittam. It is there, and somehow it comes out in the dream, and it could come out in different combinations. I could see men with horns. I could see, talking dogs, walking, walking plants. I could see all sorts of messy, different mixtures in my dream. But who creates the dream objects? So, dream, you are Ishvara in the dream because you are the Upadana Karanam, material cause for the dream. You are also the intelligent cause for the dream. The only difference between dream state and the waking state is that Ishvara here is the material cause for the waking state objects. Ishvara is the intelligent cause for the waking state objects. But nastiram jagare stiram. He says, waking and dream logically are identical. Objects are also coming and going in the dream as they are in waking state. But in swapna, they are astiram, they're more fleeting. Here in this dream, they seem to last longer. We have a longer experience because when we keep coming back, it is like that there's a very old movie called Groundhog Day. You keep waking up to the same day again and again, can come back to the same day, adjusting. So in a way, we're coming back to the same dream. Same dream, we're coming back. Every day we wake up, we're coming back to the same dream again and again and again. Whereas in the dream, once you wake up, that dream is falsified. So one is a short dream, one is a longer dream. That is the only difference in Vedanta. There is no difference otherwise from this dream or that dream. So this is less momentary that is, this is more lasting, that is momentary, the dream state. So in waking state, he says, the objects are stiram, they seem graspable, they seem holdable, they seem tangible, but even on inquiry, we know the world is not as tangible as we take it to be. Everything looks tangible. That is what is called as though. That's why this word in Vedanta is the word for Vedanta, as though real. Everything, including one's own self, as though real. So, because of the nature of objects, there is a difference, but otherwise, he says it is the same logic. Tat bedo tastayoho samvit eka rupa na vidyate. Tayoho, he says, in both the states, samvit eka rupa. Consciousness is only one form. Consciousness is there, lighting up this waking state, this dream of the waking state. It is like it lighting up. It is lighting up the dream state for all of us also. That's so. This chit is consciousness. When it manifests, lights up. It is uniform. He says, eka rupa. It is uniform. It never changes. It is always there in all the states in the in our experience. So here, Vidyaranya wants to establish again the nityatvam, or the timelessness of the individual, with reference to the true nature of the individual. The individual is that nabidyate ekarupa, the one non-changing truth that lights up both the waking state and the dream state. And we're going to see tomorrow the sleep state. What happens to consciousness in deep sleep? You will see tomorrow. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaः Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om